I love that music. Every single week, I'm just jacked up. It's so weird because it just, it gets me going. I know that's a little bit weird, but there it is. That's what I am. I am Mark Meckler. This is the Sunday Night Battle Cry. As always, I'm jacked up to be with you guys because this is what I like to do more than anything, which is hang out with you, the grassroots, my extended family all across the country. And I come here every Sunday night. I'm expecting you to be here. You're expecting me to be here. We get together, meeting of the minds, right? Hang out a little bit. Talk politics, talk whatever we talk, right? The news, mostly we talk a lot about the news, what happened in the past week, what's coming up this week. So let's get right to it, shall we? Because there's a lot of stuff out there this week. Okay, this is a big one for me. Some very interesting developments taking place, which I think are not only going to affect just what's going on in the country, but I think there is a potential big legal effect here. There's a headline in Reuters that says White House working with Facebook and Twitter to tackle anti-vaxxers. That's a real headline. The White House working directly with Facebook and Twitter to tackle anti-vaxxers. And if you go on to read the article, what it talks about is how the White House is putting pressure on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites to control information, right? They're putting pressure on them to control what you can say online. If you're skeptical about the COVID vaccine, and why wouldn't you be, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't take it or you should take it, but I think there are legitimate questions about that. And if you're expressing that skepticism, even if you're a medical professional expressing that skepticism, the government wants Facebook and Twitter to crack down on that stuff. Now, I want you to think about what that means. A lot of times you'll hear people say, and I say this myself, by the way, as a constitutionalist, private companies, private action, not subject to the First Amendment. In other words, the First Amendment says that the government may not infringe upon speech, but it doesn't say Facebook or Twitter or Mark Meckler can't infringe upon free speech, right? It says the government can't. But there's a new legal theory kind of bubbling up through the courts and bubbling through legal academia in libertarian and right-leaning circles that says that there can be something called a state actor in regard to the First Amendment. That means somebody who's not actually part of the government, but is actually acting at the behest and potentially the control of the state. In other words, when the state is putting enough pressure on somebody or some institutions to do or say, or to control speech, I should say, in a way that the government would not be allowed to do, then that's a state actor. That entity or that person actually becomes an actor subject to the same First Amendment limitations that the state or the federal government would be subject to. So in this case, I think we're over the line. I think this is clearly an evidence of a state actor. In other words, Facebook and Google, Twitter, whomever, being subjected to pressure by the Biden administration directly, telling them what information they can and cannot show. That's pretty radical stuff, right? So this is direct control. This isn't just Facebook and Twitter doing it on their own. This is direct pressure from the federal government limiting freedom of speech. I think it's pretty clear. I think it's a good argument to make that now you have state actors like Google, Facebook, Twitter, all these other organizations are acting at the behest of the state. And the state is asking them to do things that the state is not allowed to do itself. I think there's constitutional liability there. I think we're going to see litigation around this stuff. And I think there's a good chance that the current Supreme Court, if it makes it all the way up to the Supreme Court, would rule that this state actor theory is viable. So keep an eye on that. I think that's a big deal. And I think this is important because when we start to see this kind of intersection between big government and the big tech oligarchies, I think we're going to have to watch out. When the big tech oligarchies step in and they start doing things government can't do at the behest of government, then the limitations of the Constitution might, I think, and should apply. So that's pretty interesting stuff. All right, to stay in the social media news, I have to say this week, woe unto Facebook. Right? Facebook is in trouble. You may not have seen this. There's a standoff. There has been a standoff between Facebook and Australia. The Australian government is working on passing legislation that says that when Facebook contains links to news stories on Facebook pages, that Facebook then has to pay the news companies for that content. The news companies like the New York Times or the Washington Post or anybody else spend a lot of money, millions, ultimately billions of dollars to create that content. And then what Facebook does is uses links to that content to drive traffic to their own site. And then they sell advertising to the people that are looking at those links. So the theory is Facebook's using that content to make money. Part of that money belongs to the publishers. Well, Facebook doesn't like that very much, right? It infringes on their business model. And so they like the free content. That's their business model. And so what they did is they said to Australia, okay, we're just going to shut off all Australian news to the Australian sites. So they, throw their toys out of the crib and go home or whatever. As my British friend says, they threw all of their toys out of the pram and went home. So this is what Facebook did. Australian government didn't blink. Now it looks like Facebook has come back to the negotiating table. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Facebook, probably doesn't really care about Australia. I care about Australia, but Australia population-wise, not that big. But Facebook probably doesn't care about them because they're not that big. So now apparently there are 15 other countries interested in taking Australia's approach to Facebook, making Facebook pay for content of publishers whose content is featured on Facebook. This is a pretty radical maneuver. I think Facebook is finding itself in some pretty serious crosshairs right now. I'm not supposed to say that, right? Oh, is that triggering? Did I trigger somebody? It's okay. All right. Facebook's finding itself in the crosshairs here of all these countries, pretty much everybody hating on Facebook these days. Is that unfair? No, of course it's not unfair. Facebook is part of the evil tech oligarchy. We should hate on Facebook. That's where we are. That's where the world is. So governments now hating on Facebook, pushing back against Facebook, potentially breaking Facebook's monetization model, which I actually think is a good thing. So I think Facebook is in trouble right now. If these 15 countries get together, Lord knows if the US will come along, but a bunch of countries getting together, that's growing momentum. It's anti-Facebook. And the lizard people ruler of Facebook is in trouble, Mark Zuckerberg. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. True, he's a lizard person. I'm just saying. All right, number 3, new legislation out there pending right now in Oklahoma. I believe it just passed a Senate committee in Oklahoma. It would protect drivers who hit protesters during protests. Now, I want to be really clear. I don't think people should hit protesters who are participating in protests. I don't think you should hit them even if they're blocking highways and streets that you're on, except sometimes it's real dangerous and they're out in those streets and it's hard for people to avoid them, or people themselves and their families feel threatened. That was one of the things that motivated this case, this legislation in Oklahoma. There was a family of 3 in a truck surrounded by protesters, pounding on the truck, screaming at the truck. It was a man and his kid and his wife, and he felt threatened and he drove through the crowd. Some protesters got hurt, right? And so the key is to protect people who end up in these situations in their cars. To the protesters, this is what I would have to say to the protesters, all right? Just to be blunt. Stay the hell out of the street. Did your mom teach you better? My mom told me, stay the hell out of the street. What are you, Meshuggah? Right? Don't go in the street. And these protesters who think they need to go into the street to make their points, when you go in the street and you obstruct traffic, that's no longer peaceful protest, in my opinion. That's dangerous protest. You're putting protesters at risk. You're putting motorists at risk. That's just not cool. So I think these laws are a good thing. There are multiple other states considering these laws, and they are granting immunity to people who, in crowds, in cars, who end up hitting protesters, because those people end up getting charged with crimes and getting sued. That's a bad thing. Oklahoma's fixing it. There's so much cool stuff in Oklahoma. You gotta love Oklahoma, including my friend, the late, great Senator Tom Coburn, one of the greatest senators ever to walk the earth, one of the greatest human beings, in my opinion, ever to live. One of my mentors from, of course, Oklahoma, originally Muskogee, retired in Tulsa. That's where he was when we were working together. I miss you, Tom. I love you, brother. And to Tom's family, love all of you guys. Wouldn't be anything if it were not for Tom. Next up in the news, the Cruz scandal. Ooh, big stuff, right? Ted Cruz leaves the country, goes to Cancun with his daughters during Texas's big snowstorm. Now, it was bad here. It was a mess here for sure. And it was probably bad optics for Ted and the kids to hop on an airplane and go to Cancun. However, I'd have probably done it if I had the chance. It was cold here. Got down to 3 degrees. We Texans were not used to that stuff. And Ted, what could a senator do about a massive snow and ice storm in his state? What could he do? Nothing. That's right. The silence means nothing. Ted couldn't do anything about it. And so really, I don't think there was anything wrong with him going other than bad optics. And politicians, they do have to worry about the optics. So maybe a bad choice by Ted. And he ultimately admitted that. Bad choice on the optics. But here's the thing is we have to compare this to real actual scandals, like the scandal of Governor Cuomo in New York, who is personally responsible for the deaths of many, many, many thousands of people in nursing homes. Upwards of 15,000 people died in the nursing homes because Governor Cuomo issued an order that people who tested positive for COVID, the nursing homes were required to take them back. Can you imagine the insanity of this? Our most vulnerable population being forced back into the nursing homes. The deaths were astounding. Meanwhile, Cuomo writes a book about how awesome he is, right? So now there's an investigation. The DOJ, the FBI are involved in investigating. The state attorney general is involved in investigating. Why do we know about this? We know about it because there was a call in which one of Cuomo's chief staffers admitted that they hid the evidence, that they hid it to stop a DOJ probe, that they hid it to prevent President Trump from having ammunition. And here's the amazing thing. The Ted Cruz thing, it spawned a million memes. There's a million news stories all over the mainstream media. Cuomo, what do you get? 3 minutes on CNN about this? Is his brother Chris, he of the giant Q-tip and the fawning interviews with his brother, Governor Cuomo, is he covering this about what a scumbag his brother is and how he's responsible for the deaths of in excess of 10,000 people? Of course not. And so this is how the media works. And this is why when there's a scandal, quote unquote, with Ted Cruz going to Cancun, you can say, well, probably bad optics for Ted. But the real scandal, look over there, not where they're telling you to look over here. Look over there. The real scandal is Cuomo out in New York, the worst mayor in New York. He should be impeached, should be recalled, whatever they can do to him. He certainly should never be able to run for public office again. Maybe he can go on air with his brother and they can do the Cuomo show. Absolutely outrageous and disgusting stuff. All right, let's talk a little bit about Texas, because I love talking about Texas because this is where I live. It's my adopted home. I'm a proud Texan. You know, one of the reasons I moved to Texas was I lived in the mountains in Northern California, and I did like the snow occasionally in the winter, but, you know, I was kind of ready to get away from that. Really ready to get away from rolling blackouts. Anybody? Rolling blackouts? How did that happen in Texas? How did that happen in Texas? That is what happened in Texas over the last week. It got down to 3 degrees. We had snow, we had ice, we had sleet. I've never seen anything like it. Power went out. We had the candles, we had the fireplace. Power came on, power went out. I mean, it was over and over and over. It was insanity here. And here we are in the Meckler household today. Today it was, I don't know, good 60 degrees out. I went out to dinner with Lucy and her boyfriend, or I should say her fiance now. We had Levi with us, Patty with us. I was in my shirt sleeves. See, short sleeves. It's like 60 degrees out today. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful out. Yet here at the Meckler homestead, we are still without water. It's a good thing you don't have smell-o-vision, right? We have no water. We haven't had water for over a week. The power's back on. Everything's good in that regard. The well pipes froze. For those of you who have wells, you know how that might work. They froze up when it got down to 0 or 3 degrees and there was no power. They froze up. They shattered. Had all those replaced. I thought we were going to be good to go. I think the well pump's fried. I think that's what's going on here in Texas. So we called all the well companies. We're very excited. We're going to have snap service, maybe because people know who I am. March 2nd. March 2nd. So we have no water until March 2nd. It's pretty ugly. Showering at the folks' house. You know, just don't come by unannounced or you might be greeted by a hostile smell here in the Meckler household. All right, a couple more things we need to cover. How about this? How about anything else going on? Is there anything else you guys can think of? Has anybody heard any other news recently that might be interesting? Like Parlor is back online, right? Now I have to be really careful how I talk about Parlor. And the reason is because this is a COS show and COS is not allowed as a nonprofit organization do anything specifically to benefit Parlor, which is a for-profit company. But I can tell you it's back online. I'm using it. And so I'm there regularly. Everything seems to be working flawlessly. I like that. As the CEO, I'm helping them to reorganize and get back online, which they are. And ultimately, we're going to bring in a permanent CEO. But everything's good over at Parlor. I'm enjoying myself immensely. I think it's really aligned with COS. I mean, this is one of the things that I think is important for us to know. Convention of States is all about self-governance, right? It's all about restoring self-governance to America. It's all about who decides. And if we're going to talk about who decides, if we're going to talk about taking the power away from DC and giving it back to the states, notice I said if we're going to talk about, we have to be able to talk, right? That's the key. And we have to be able to talk in a way that's uncensored because we don't believe in censorship. We are First Amendment folks. Talked about that earlier on. It's not about the private companies, but we are First Amendment folks. We are free speech folks. We believe, you and I, that if there's bad speech, we should meet that with good speech. If there's bad speech, we should meet it with even more good speech, right? You make the better argument. That's how you win in politics. That's how you win in society. That's how you influence the course of society and culture. It's not by silencing other people. It's by encouraging free speech. And that's what Convention of States is all about. And I think it's a perfect parallel because that's what Parlor is all about too. So I just want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. I love you guys. In fact, I'm still in the fight for COS every single day. This coming week, what's going on? I'm headed to South Dakota. You might know I was already in South Dakota this year. I go where you need me. And so I'm going back to South Dakota. I think it's going to be colder there than it is here. Certainly now that it's 50 or 60 degrees here in Texas. But I'm going back to South Dakota. We're in the Senate and we're going to have a hearing. There's going to be a whole bunch of South Dakotans there. If you're from South Dakota, then you need to go to Pierre. If you can make it, I need you there. We need to muster the troops. We need to stand in the fight. We need to be ready to go. Because the question, as always, is, will you stand? Will you fight? Will you be in the game? Are you going to let them take away your rights? You're going to let them squash your ability to speak freely. You're going to let them squash your ability to practice your religion freely. You're going to let them take your guns. You let them do all that stuff without standing. I don't think so, because you're COS activists. So I know you're going to be in the fight. By the way, if you're not already in the fight, you need to go to conventionofstates.com. You need to sign the petition, and then you need to click on the take action button, because that's really what activism is all about. It's about being active, right? It's about actually being in the fight. It's about actually doing the things that make a difference. That's what we need you to do. I'm going to go to Q&A here shortly, but I'm going to ask you something. I'm going to ask you a favor. I want questions. Like, a lot of you guys give me comments. They're good comments. They're very complimentary often. They make me feel great. I appreciate all that stuff. But I'm looking for some questions because I want to answer your questions, because you're really what it's all about here at COS. You know, before I go to questions, I just want to kind of sum up what I think is going on in America right now. This is really important. We're experiencing something not seen in most of our lifetimes. We're actually seeing the rise of fascism. Now, that might sound radical and crazy to some of you guys. Some people would say, Mark, you use the word fascism, that's over the top. I've said this a few weeks in the past, and I'm going to keep repeating it. Benito Mussolini, the founder, the originator of the concept of fascism, said fascism means everything inside the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. I want to unpack that a little bit. Everything inside the state. What's that mean? It means that the government can and should do everything. The government should provide your health care, should provide your education, should regulate the environment, should regulate energy, should regulate commerce, should regulate what kind of gasoline you could put in your car, should regulate what kind of toilet you could put in your house. Everything, everything, everything inside the state. That's the vision of fascism. What's outside the reach of the state in fascism? He said it very clearly. Nothing outside the state. This is just a corollary. Everything inside the state, nothing outside the state. Just wanted to make sure that he was very clear about this, right? Everything is about state power. And so I think that's really important that you understand that this is what Mussolini meant when he said everything inside the state and nothing outside the state, right? It's important that you understand these things, because this is what's happening in America today. And so what I want you to think about is the last one. He said nothing against the state. What did he mean by that? What he meant is you're not allowed to speak out against the orthodoxy. Whatever the state says is the orthodoxy is the thing, right? That is the thing. That's what you have to toe the line on. So what are we seeing today? Political correctness, wokeism, attacks on individuals who say what they believe, right? If it doesn't match the orthodoxy, if you say something like, I believe that biologically and scientifically men are men and women are women and they're different, you're going to get attacked for that today. If you say, I believe in God, you're likely going to be attacked for that today. If you say something like, I believe abortion is wrong or illegal or life begins at conception, you're likely to be attacked for those things today. If you say, I don't believe in anti-racism. I don't believe all white people are racist. I don't believe in white privilege. If you say those things, you're likely to be attacked today. Those things today are doctrines being imposed not only by private sector, but by the state. So nothing against the state means not allowed to say those things, right? And we're seeing this more and more, not just by private actors, but in government. So we are genuinely, sincerely seeing the rise of fascism in America today. And you need to be aware of that. You need to pay attention to that. You need to call it out. That's our job. If you believe in the Republic, if you believe in our Constitution, if you believe that this nation is something special, something incredible, something based on universal values and principles, then you have to stand against the fascism you see. There will be costs. There will be consequences. People will give you a hard time. You might lose friends. You might lose family. You might lose a job. You might lose status in society, in your community. The question is, what price are you willing to pay to protect humanity? Which is really what it's about. It's not about you. It's about the concept of duty. The concept of duty meaning you do things because you're duty bound to do them, not because they necessarily benefit you personally. You might get attacked. You might lose when you do something that it's your duty to do, but you do it for your kids. You do it for your grandkids. You do it for future generations. You do it for the benefit of society, for the benefit of all posterity. That's acting out of a sense of duty. And I'm telling you, we live in a time where that kind of action, that acting out of a sense of duty is required. All right, so I'm going to run through some Q&A now. I asked you guys for some good questions. There are some good questions out here. Velma Kerr says, how many signatures do you need per state for COS? Velma, there's not a mandatory number of signatures. The deal is the more people who sign the petition, the more pressure it puts on the legislators to actually be in support of the Convention of States resolution. So how many do we need? As many as you can get. Mac Brown says, what's my part in Parlor? Mac, I am the acting or interim CEO of Parlor. So I run the organization over there. And I want to be really clear when I say I run the organization. The staff over there is so incredible. Like, I love the staff at Parlor like I love the staff at COS. I mean, COS is my family, been around a long time. This is my new adopted family. Great people. They do all the hard work. I come in, I'm helping to reorganize things, helping things to get running smoother, helping them to get back up and running. But really, all the credit to the incredible staff over there. Bill McDowell said, should Republicans impeach Biden to honor the precedent set under the previous administration? Look, a lot of people have been saying that. I struggle a little bit with that. I understand the temptation, but I still think we've got to be the party of the rule of law. And I think if there was grounds to impeach Biden, legitimate grounds, we ought to impeach him. If there's not, then we shouldn't. Not just to make a point. John Hayes asks, are you working with Soros? I love that question, John. Somebody wrote that today, put a news story out. I'm working with Soros. Look, as long as I've been doing politics, people have been accusing me of working with George Soros. If somebody can produce the evidence, I'd love to see it. Of course, I'm not working with George Soros. George Soros is a fundamentally anti-American actor. I am fundamentally pro-American. George Soros, just a bad dude, honestly, funds a lot of bad stuff. And if you go into legislatures around the country, what you'll see is Soros-funded organizations have signed up to lobby against Convention of States. Specifically, we've got Arabella Advisors has the Hopewell Project and the 1630 Fund, I think it's called, or project. They're actually registering lobbyists against Convention of States. Those are Soros-funded organizations. So it'd be a little weird if I was working for Soros or working with Soros if his organizations were against us. Also, I need you to remember 230 plus, now 250 organizations signed a press release issued by Common Dreams against the idea of a Convention of States. That's a weird way for Soros to show me love, if that's the idea. Patricia Ann Tom says, how many states have passed COS? Patricia, it's 15 states, 34 required. I think we'll get another 5, 6, maybe more this year. Should be up over the 20 mark. That's how many have passed. Mark White says, when's the next committee vote for Convention of States? I think it'll be in the Senate in South Dakota this week. Suzanne Rosero asks, what can I do in a blue state for COS? Look, this is a really important question, Susan. It's just as important in a blue state, because what we're doing is we're building the largest self-governing grassroots army in American history. You need to go in, you need to join, you need to educate your legislators, and you need to help build the army. Even if your state doesn't call for a convention of states, your state is going to participate when we get to convention. And the people who have the most influence will be people like you that have been engaged. So go to the website, conventionofstates.com, click on the Take Action tab afterwards, and join up. Sign up to be a district captain. Harvey Fitzgerald says another great COS town hall today in Sturgis, South Dakota. Even new members are going to appear. By the way, Harvey, incredible activists there in South Dakota. And these guys are out. What's our excuse? These guys are out. It's 20 below. There's 60 of them at a meeting. It's incredible. So, Harvey, I will see you there in Pierre. Connie Shaben says, where's Nebraska on COS? Connie, it's a little bit frustrating in that state, but we're moving forward. Dave Schneider, our regional director, was there last week. As you know, it's a unicam, a single-body legislature there in Nebraska. There's a couple of problems there. We always end up in a committee that's somewhat unfavorable there. More importantly, if we make it to the floor, one of the things that we have that's a problem in Nebraska is that they have this weird thing in the House where you need a super majority to even get a vote. So we could pass if it was simple majority, but you need the super majority to get the vote. We need the House to change the rules. Philip Law says, how do we move the media to actually report the news? I don't think you can. All we do is we create places where the news is reported that we actually believe is real news, right? So there are news entities that I think are doing that to some extent. Newsmax, OANN. My favorite news source right now, Epic Times. If you want to see real news, I think it's unbiased, straight ahead news reporting. Jan Jekielek is one of my favorite reporters out there of any reporter. And he's, I think, senior editor over there. So go look up Epic Times and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Let's see. Simon Waters says, will Trump be joining Parlor? The answer is, I'd love to see Trump join Parlor, but I'd also love to see President Biden join Parlor. Parlor is a nonpartisan platform. It doesn't have an ideological bent other than free speech. So anybody who believes in free speech can and should be on Parlor. Taz Tony says, can we get amendments before the next election? I would say, Taz, probably not. That's probably unlikely to get to convention within 2 years. John Mark Dempsey says, how is it possible to specify the proposed changes for COS? I think what you mean, John, is can we have specific amendments going into convention? The answer is no, because a convention is meant to be a deliberative body. So what we have is a subject matter application. That subject matter has 3 areas specified. In convention, you could talk about putting fiscal restraints on the federal government, term limits on federal officials, and scope and jurisdictional restraints on the federal government. What will come out of convention are specific amendments, and then those amendments will be ratified or not by the states. Bernie Sully asks, how is Wisconsin with COS? Man, I'm as excited about Wisconsin as I am about any state right now. We have great leadership in both the houses there in the Senate. Kathy Bernier, who came over from the House, is our prime sponsor. Chris Kappinga is the head of the Senate now, the Senate president. He's long been an Article 5 guy, so we look good in the Senate. Dan Knodel has long been our sponsor in the House of Representatives, one of my favorite guys in the legislatures all around the country. Got a lot of sponsors in the House. I think we look really good in Wisconsin this year. And by the way, Bernie, get involved, man. Go to conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, click on the Take Action tab, sign up to be a district captain. We need you. I expect to see you next time I'm there. Sharon Turner Clifford says, what can we do as individuals to promote COS? Talk to everybody about it. Promote it at your church, order a bunch of the pocket guides and get those pocket guides handed out. Promote it on your own social media. This is a big deal. Facebook is now preventing all political advertising. And obviously, this is a very big negative for conservative groups. The liberals are in charge already. So post it on your own page, grab our link, grab our content, spread it out to your network. Seth McEntee says, is Parlor accepting new users yet? The answer is no. Platform is stabilized. We're really happy it's performing better than it's ever performed even before it went down. Hopefully by the end of next week, we'll be accepting new users. What we're doing is serving Parlor's 21 million users, existing users first, and then we'll start to open up the platform to new users. All right, that's it. That's all the questions. You guys did a good job. You asked real good, solid questions this week. I love that from you guys. I love you guys. You guys are the best in the world. By the way, lots of prayers and well wishes and thoughts to our family came from you guys surrounding the loss of Gideon. Last week, I did a little bit of an emotional tribute to Gideon. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you guys. It really is salve to the heart, when you're feeling pain and there's so many people out there sending love and prayers back your way. it's a really helpful thing. It still hurts. You know, you guys know lots of you have lost pets, loved ones. A lot harder, obviously, when the humans go. So you know what that pain feels like. And it just feels great to be part of a community and a family that cares enough about each other that people express that to each other. If you want more of this kind of stuff, you can find me at markmeckler.com. You can subscribe over there, small fee. That fee supports, it goes directly to Convention Estates. So go to markmeckler.com, become part of the community. We appreciate you. We love you. Remember, conventionestates.com, get signed up, click take action. We'll see you next week on the Battle Cry.